Hey everyone, for those of us invested in cryptocurrencies, the last week has been dramatic and nerve-wracking. The price of a single Bitcoin was over around $60,000 per coin, and at the low touched around $30,000 per coin. Now it's recovered a little bit, but for those of us used to stock market returns, this type of volatility is crazy. And the reason for it is pretty interesting. With a stock, if the price moves too much, you can always go back to the stock's earnings in order to say, okay, I think I know what it should be worth. With cryptocurrencies, not so much. Result, crazy things are happening. Let's examine what happened in the past week and why it had such a big impact on the crypto markets, because we need to be able to assess what kind of environment we're going to be dealing with going forward. The turmoil started when Elon Musk tweeted that Tesla would stop accepting Bitcoin as a use of payment for its cars. Now, notably, they did not say that Tesla had sold any of its Bitcoin, nor did Elon indicate that they had any clear intention to do so. Rather, they did this little bit of a walk back on environmental concerns. Things got even worse when the Chinese government followed up with further crackdowns and restrictions on Bitcoin mining activity within its borders. Now, Bitcoin mining activity is important because it determines the security along with being able to run the transactions. Now, China is currently the area with the most Bitcoin mining activity in the world. So this is consequential when there's potential restrictions coming down that will affect the ability to do this. All right, what does it mean? Well, it's actually interesting as to why the price fell as sharply and as violently as it did. Yes, people were selling on the bad news from Elon and the Chinese government, but that's not really what made the price fall as fast as it did. What did that was people buying and selling on margin or borrowed money. Now, when you borrow money to buy a stock, a Bitcoin, or anything, your broker has certain requirements in terms of how much money you have to have in your account relative to the amount of money you borrowed. When you don't, the broker liquidates your account in order to pay what you owe. That's called a margin call. Now, when you get a sharp move in the price of the asset, like you did with Bitcoin in response to Elon and the Chinese government, this triggers a bunch of margin calls. Now, normally it's not too big of a problem, but in the case where you have thousands or in some instances hundreds of thousands of accounts trading on margin, you get these huge waves of margin calls where the drop from one margin call results in another margin call, and you just get this wave that tanks the price, similar to how we saw, and that's how you get a 50% cut in the total price. What should we do about it? Normally when a stock falls, we have something called intrinsic value to fall back on, where the company is earning profits or cash flows, and we can base our price in somewhere in the neighborhood of what we think those are going to be. Crypto, not so much. Here's how I think about it. What if crypto has no intrinsic value, and it only rather is a reflection of pure supply and demand, meaning the number of people buying versus the number of people selling at any moment in time? Now, if there's more people buying than selling, the price goes up. If there's more people selling than buying, the price goes down, which is what we saw in extreme fashion last week. When you get these margin calls, there's no way that enough people can be buying in order to overwhelm the selling that is occurring. So rather, if we think about any cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Ether, in the future, we have to be implicitly saying, I think there's going to be more buyers than sellers at that point in time. That's implicitly what we're saying when we purchase a cryptocurrency. Now, if we think about it in terms of supply and demand, Bitcoin, this is pretty easy to understand. The supply is structurally decreasing, and on the other hand, the more people who believe in it, they're going to be buying those coins and taking them offline, which also reduces supply. So if you think the demand for Bitcoin will go up over time, it almost doesn't matter how slowly it's going to go up over time, the price is going to go up, which is really good for Bitcoin holders. Now, where this gets complicated is if you start putting big price targets on Bitcoin, you have to start saying, who's the marginal buyer? This past year, that's been corporations and institutions who have been accepting it for the first time. The reason the Elon and China news is legitimately bad for Bitcoin is because if I'm the marginal buyer as part of a pension fund, a mutual fund, or a corporate balance sheet, and I see the price of my assets being moved by a tweet, I'm not going to go ahead and buy it. It's not going to be easy for me to accept. There's just too much risk, not only for the assets, but for my own reputation. So whatever price target those of us invested thought we could get by the end of the year, or even maybe in the next couple years, is probably delayed, even if the case is still strong. On the other hand, so many people have sold recently that it's quite possible that a lot of what they call the weak hands are out of the market, meaning that anyone who's thinking about selling has probably sold at this point, and the only direction it can go is up. We'll see. You might have some people whose faith in it was shaken at this point, and they're just waiting for it to go back to their break-even point so that they can sell it and make some profits and move on. So really what we should think about from this is whatever timeline you had on it, you are going to have to extend it out if you want to keep holding it in this space. So what should you do about this? Well, as with everything in investing, you have to tailor it to your own risk tolerance. The old adage goes, if you can sleep at night, great. If you can't sleep at night, you need to reduce your position until you can sleep at night. So this applies to Bitcoin, it applies to any cryptocurrency, and it applies to any stock as well. On the other hand, if you're looking to get in, like I said in the previous segment, there's quite a distinct possibility that we might be seeing temporary lows in the price of most cryptocurrencies, because anyone who was thinking about selling probably sold in the past week or so. What about other cryptocurrencies? Well, the case with Bitcoin in terms of supply and demand is pretty clear cut. As we mentioned before, the supply is shrinking, so any amount of demand growing is going to help the price. If you're considering other cryptocurrencies, you need to look at it with quite a bit of scrutiny, because some of them do not have this protocol in place. Some of them, the supply keeps increasing, and even some very popular ones recently. So if you're going to look at any of them, you just need to know what the underlying protocol is before you jump in. Let's take a high-profile example. So Shiba Inu coin, or SHIB, which is thought to be a competitor to the well-known Dogecoin, their founders had a simple strategy for keeping the supply in check. They donated half of it to Vitalik, the founder of Ethereum. Now, this might have been an okay idea at the start, but what Vitalik turned around and did was he donated a sizable portion of his holdings because he didn't want the responsibility. That dramatically increased the short-term supply of SHIB and was not good for the price. Now, every cryptocurrency is different, but it's just an example of how supply and demand can change very quickly, and if you're going to buy one of these things, you need to know how those things are going to move. Bitcoin, not so much. The supply is fixed and it's constantly shrinking depending on who loses their coins or intentionally takes them off of circulation. If you've heard of some interesting coins of late that you think have an interesting protocol that might be worthy of investment, please let me know in the comments below. I'm very curious about the space. In the meantime, stay safe out there. It's pretty wild. If you like this channel and enjoy the content, please don't forget to subscribe below, and I will see you next time.